Hey there friends, it's me Peter, and welcome to another edition of my weekly Wednesday video. This week I take a look at a subject that is very near and dear to my heart, jumping the shark. Now before I go any further, you may be asking yourself, what is jumping the shark? Well, jumping the shark refers to that moment in your favorite TV show when it starts to go downhill and you know there is no possible way for it to recover. The term, coined by John Hine, comes from an episode of Happy Days where the Fonz, clad in water skis, literally jumped over a shark. Since then, the term has been used to describe not only TV shows, but movies and even people on occasion. With that in mind, I've decided to take a look at some of my favorite TV shows and explain when I believe they jumped the shark. And what better way to get things started than by taking a look at some of my favorite TV shows from my childhood. Today, I'm specifically going to be taking a look at all the Nicktoons that aired on Nickelodeon. Now, I'd like to set a few ground rules first. Firstly, I will only be discussing Nicktoons that I have seen at least 5 episodes of. That way, I feel like I've gotten a feel for the series, I understand what it's about, and it's fair for me to judge it that way. Secondly, instead of going in a specific order with these Nicktoons, I've decided to shake things up a bit. I have taken the names of all the Nicktoons I am interested in discussing and placed them in this hat here. Now, one at a time, I will randomly pick the name of a Nicktoon from this hat and discuss when I believe that show jumped the shark. Let's get started with the first Nicktoon I pick, which will be... All Grown Up, the spin-off to Rugrats. Now, I know a lot of people that didn't like this show. They thought it was just a gimmick to get the old Rugrats fans who were growing up to come back in the series. And, yeah, you know, it probably was. But, honestly, the show wasn't terrible. Now, even though I don't consider the show to be terrible, I do have to admit I really wasn't a fan of it. I didn't really watch it religiously. I've only seen about 5 episodes of the show, and it just didn't hold my interest like Rugrats did. So if I have to say when it jumped the shark, I honestly couldn't provide you a reason. But, having said that, I also was not a fan of the show. Now the next Nicktoon I will be analyzing is... The Wild Thornberrys. I initially was not a huge fan of the show, but it held my interest. I enjoyed watching episodes from time to time. I enjoyed sitting back, relaxing, and watching what kind of misadventures Eliza was going to get into this week. But I have to say, the show jumped the shark after I'd been watching it for a while, and I slowly began to realize that Eliza really didn't know anything about these animals. Now this is really shocking, especially when you realize that Eliza's parents were animal experts, so you would think Eliza would know a little more about these animals than she apparently did. Maybe a little nitpick, but after I realized that, I just stopped watching the show. The next Nicktoon I will be taking a look at... The Ren and Stimpy Show. I'm gonna be honest. I hated this show. I didn't think it was funny. I thought the gross-out humor was disgusting. I mean, not just for children, but for adults. I mean, even though I'm an adult, I have no desire to watch this show. I know a lot of people are probably going to be shocked by me saying I hated the show, especially since I was a huge fan of Rocco's Modern Life. The difference was that Rocco wasn't blatant with its gross-out humor. It was more subtle in Rocco, whereas Ren and Stimpy was just out there. And I never got into it. I always hated Ren and Stimpy. I could never sit through a full episode and say I truly enjoyed it. Let's see what show I will be discussing next. As Told by Ginger. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I have not seen that many As Told by Ginger episodes. It started airing in 2001, which was around the time I stopped watching Nickelodeon. However, I have seen enough episodes of the show where I feel that I can judge it fairly, and based on that, I have to say, I don't think this show ever jumped the shark. As Told by Ginger was one of those rare Nickelodeon shows that wasn't afraid to take risks. I mean, they talked about some heavy stuff on this show. They talked about friendships falling apart. They did an episode about puberty one time. They did another episode where a character's grandma died. And perhaps most shockingly, they did an episode about depression. A Nickelodeon cartoon show did an episode about depression. Now, I never saw the episode myself, but I've been told that it really didn't shy away from discussing it. Which, you know, kudos to that, you know? That's rare for a Nickelodeon show to do, especially a cartoon. You know, I may not have been the biggest fan of As Told by Ginger, but kudos to them for tackling such heavy topics. Next up, The Fairly Odd Parents. Simply put, I hate this show. I find it incredibly annoying. I find it incredibly juvenile. I find it incredibly obnoxious. What more can I say? Next up, The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. Again, like As Told by Ginger, Jimmy Neutron aired later on in my life, around the time I stopped watching Nickelodeon. But having said that, I actually was a fan of this show. I loved watching it. I thought the characters were interesting. I thought the humor was great. But it did jump the shark, and unfortunately, it happened in the first season. Jimmy Neutron jumped because of something I like to call rerun abuse. Essentially, the same episodes get played over and over and over again. In Jimmy Neutron's case, the first season I think only had 7 episodes, so Nickelodeon was constantly replaying those 7 while season 2 was in production. And while I did still watch the show after that point, to me it was just never the same, because for a year and a half, I had just been seeing the same 7 episodes over and over again, and had kind of gotten bored with it. That's not to say the show lost its humor. It didn't. Actually, I thought it was still as funny as ever. But still, nothing was ever the same after that first season. Oh yeah. Next up, we got Rocco's Modern Life. Rocco's Modern Life is probably my second or third favorite Nicktoon. Depends on the day I'm having. Rocco was one of those shows that adults and kids could watch, because the kids could watch the show and they would not get the innuendo in the show. There was so much innuendo in the show that it wasn't even funny. Or maybe it was, I don't know. However, the innuendo ended up being the show's undoing, because around the 4th season, which was the show's last, they really scaled back on the innuendo. I believe Nickelodeon finally caught on to what the show was getting away with, and they made them stop. I mean, the innuendo is what made Rocco famous, and when they scaled back on it, it just wasn't the same anymore. It's a shame, because it really was a funny show. Still is a funny show. Heck, Rocco actually had scenes cut from the episodes after they had first aired. Can you think of any other cartoon that's happened to? SpongeBob SquarePants. Okay, judge me all you want, but I used to be a huge fan of SpongeBob. And in fact, if an episode from one of the first 3 seasons airs, you can bet money that I'll probably watch it. SpongeBob was actually created by people that had worked on Rocco, believe it or not. Steve Hillenburg, SpongeBob's creator, had actually worked as, I believe, the creative director on Rocco. I loved it. At least until the 4th season when creator Steve Hillenburg left the show. Boy, did the humor take a downturn after that point. I can't explain it, but the show just wasn't funny anymore. It didn't have as many gags as it used to, and the humor it did have was just bizarre. I remember one episode where Mr. Krabs had stolen a bonnet from a fish that had died. I mean, that's not funny. I'm sorry, but that's not funny at all. That's just wrong. Now, I'm well aware that SpongeBob is still going strong, and yeah, a movie just came out I'm aware of, but you won't catch me in line seeing it. I was done with this show years ago. Hey Arnold. If I were to rank my 3 favorite Nicktoons, Hey Arnold would probably be at number 1. It was probably the most realistic of all the Nicktoons, which is funny to say because my life in 4th grade was nowhere near that exciting. But, you know, the plots were believable, the characters were believable, and Hey Arnold lasted forever. It debuted in 1996, and the last episode didn't air until 2004. You could say Nickelodeon treated the show well, except Nickelodeon is also the reason the show jumped the shark. Back in 2002, they came out with Hey Arnold the movie, which didn't do so well at the box office, and it apparently led to Nickelodeon scrapping plans for a second movie. That movie was to be called The Jungle Movie, and it was going to explain what happened to Arnold's parents. The Hey Arnold movie, the one that aired in theaters, was originally supposed to be a made-for-TV movie lasting 3 episodes, but Nickelodeon, for whatever reason, commissioned it to be a full-length feature. But because it did terribly, Craig Bartlett wasn't able to get the Jungle Movie greenlit. To make matters worse, one of the last episodes of Hey Arnold that aired was a 2-parter known as The Journal, where Arnold discovered a journal that had been written by his parents. And it ended on a cliffhanger. And if Nickelodeon had just let Craig Bartlett follow his original plan, we would have gotten the Jungle Movie, which was the movie Hey Arnold fans wanted to see, not some movie about Arnold saving his neighborhood. Next up, Rocket Power. I am not a sports fan at all. I don't get the obsession with sports, I don't get watching it on TV, I don't get playing sports, and I don't get the worship that athletes get. Now, having said that, Rocket Power I was actually a fan of. I don't know why I was a fan of the show, but it actually proved to be interesting. It was enjoyable seeing this group of 4 friends as they hung out in Southern California and played their sports and hung out and all that other fun stuff. At least in the first season. When the second season rolled around, 2 main plot points from the first season were abruptly dropped without any explanation. The first one, the zine. Those who watched Rocket Power's first season will remember Reggie had a magazine which she called the Zine, which was an independently produced magazine, basically just for her and her friends, where she talked about kind of what was going on in Ocean Shores and what all the kids were talking about. Season 2 was never mentioned again, which is baffling because it was one of the major plot points of the first season. Curiously, the other jump the shark moment also involves Reggie, although more specifically, it involves her 2 friends, Sherry and Trish. Reggie had these 2 friends that weren't part of the main crew, but they were supporting cast members that appeared every couple episodes or so. And after the first season, they were never seen again. No explanation, just disappeared. I don't know what it is the show didn't like about Reggie, but those 2 plot points disappearing were kind of baffling. And the final show I will be analyzing today is Rugrats. I love Rugrats. Even as an adult, I'm not afraid to say that. And if you think I'm being lame, just watch one of the first 65 episodes for yourself. This show was hilarious, and it all went downhill because of the movie. Now, I know this is probably going to make me extremely unpopular, but honestly, I don't care. The movie was the death knell for the series. First of all, they introduced Dill, who was perhaps the most annoying character in the series, but as if adding Dill to the cast wasn't bad enough, they also dumbed down the babies. But it proved really annoying. Even as a 4th grader watching the series, I picked up on that. And even back then, I'm thinking, this is dumb. They dumbed down the characters. Why? There was no reason to. Well, I don't care if it makes me unpopular. Rugrats jumped because of that movie. And there you have it, my friends. My look at all the Nickelodeon Nicktoons that I've seen and my opinions on when they jumped the shark. When did your favorite Nicktoon jump the shark? Leave me a comment down below explaining when you feel you knew it was all downhill from there. In 2 weeks, I'll be revisiting Jump the Shark by taking a look at some of my favorite live-action Nick shows, as well as my favorite Nick game shows, and finding out when they went downhill. Until then, This is Peter saying see you later.